welcome back to our channel, passionate fans of Genoa City. Today is a truly beautiful day to delve into the intricate, emotionally charged, and ever-evolving drama that keeps us all captivated. We have some incredibly intense developments to discuss regarding the Newman family, so grab your favorite beverage, settle in, and let us unpack the explosive events that are about to unfold on your screens. The lingering shadow of Matt Clark has always been a suffocating presence over the Newman family, a dark cloud of historical trauma that refuses to dissipate despite the passage of time. The very mention of his name is enough to send ripples of anxiety and rage through the core of Genoa City's most powerful dynasty. Recently, the revelation that Matt survived his brutal encounter in the desert and returned to town with severe amnesia has created a paralyzing psychological stalemate. The man who inflicted unspeakable horrors upon the Newmans now walks around with a blank slate, entirely oblivious to the monster he once was. This bizarre twist of fate has left his victims in a state of agonizing limbo, unable to exact the vengeance they so desperately crave against a man who no longer remembers his own sins. For the Newman family, this amnesia is not a mitigating factor, but rather a cruel cosmic joke, a barrier preventing them from achieving any semblance of closure or justice. For Sharon Newman, the return of Matt Clark is a waking nightmare that threatens to unravel years of hard-fought psychological healing. The trauma he inflicted upon her, specifically the horrific sexual assault that forever altered the trajectory of her life, is a wound that never truly heals, it merely scars over, leaving her forever vulnerable to the ghost of her abuser. The knowledge that Matt is currently recovering in a bed at Genoa City Hospital, breathing the same air and existing in the same town, acts as a relentless trigger for her deepest anxieties. Driven by an overwhelming, almost masochistic need to look her tormentor in the eye and gauge the authenticity of his supposed memory loss, Sharon makes the harrowing decision to confront him. She needs to know, with absolute certainty, whether the man lying in that hospital bed is a master manipulator playing a sick game of survival, or if the universe has truly wiped the slate clean for a man who deserves no such mercy. The atmosphere within the sterile quarters of Genoa City Hospital is suffocatingly heavy as Sharon makes her way toward Matt's recovery room. Every step she takes echoes with the weight of decades of unresolved pain, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The harsh fluorescent lighting seems to cast long, distorted shadows, mirroring the twisted history she shares with the man she is about to face. She carries with her the collective trauma of the Newman family, the agonizing memories of manipulation, violence, and profound violation. Her internal monologue is a chaotic symphony of fear, determination, and raw, unadulterated anger. She is a survivor walking back into the lion's den, armed with nothing but her own resilience and a desperate need for the truth. The scent of antiseptic does little to mask the metaphorical stench of the past that clings to the hospital room door. Upon entering the room, Sharon is immediately struck by the jarring visual dissonance of the scene before her. Matt Clark, the architect of her darkest nightmares, looks incredibly fragile, his body battered and bruised from his recent near-death experiences. He lacks the predatory gleam in his eye, the arrogant smirk that used to precede his acts of cruelty. Instead, he looks lost, bewildered, and fundamentally broken. This stark contrast between the terrifying monster of her memory and the vulnerable patient in the bed creates a profound psychological turbulence within Sharon. It would be so much easier if he looked evil, if he sneered at her and confirmed her worst fears. But his apparent innocence, his genuine confusion, makes the situation infinitely more complex and agonizing to navigate. She stands at the foot of his bed, a silent sentinel of judgment, her posture rigid with defensive energy. The silent exchange between them is thick with an unbearable, suffocating tension. Sharon projects a wall of absolute skepticism, her eyes scanning his face for any micro-expression that might betray a hidden agenda. She refuses to offer him the grace of the doubt, her defensive instinct screaming at her to remain vigilant. Matt, in turn, looks at her with a desperate, pleading confusion. He knows, based on the reactions of everyone he has encountered since waking up, that he has done terrible things. He can feel the immense weight of the hatred directed at him, but he lacks the context to understand it. He is a man drowning in a sea of condemnation without knowing the crimes he has committed. He looks to Sharon not as an adversary, but as a potential source of answers, yearning for a connection that might anchor his drifting, fragmented mind. As Sharon finally begins to communicate her profound mistrust, the confrontation escalates into a deeply emotional and psychological battleground. She does not hold back, her presence radiating a chilling condemnation as she questions the very fabric of his newfound innocence. She challenges his amnesia, expressing her deeply rooted belief that this is simply another one of his sick, twisted games designed to evade the consequences of his horrific actions. She demands to know if he is truly remorseful or if he is just hiding behind a convenient medical diagnosis to escape the wrath of the Newman family. Every look she gives him is laced with the poison of the past, a relentless barrage of doubt that corners Matt in his own mind. He tries to defend himself, to convey the terrifying emptiness of his memories, but his pleas fall on deaf ears. Sharon is a fortress of pain, impenetrable to his desperate attempts at reconciliation. The pivotal, catastrophic turning point arrives with devastating suddenness. In her relentless pursuit of the truth, Sharon inadvertently makes a specific gesture. Or perhaps her face contorts into a highly specific mask of terror that perfectly mirrors the expression she wore during the darkest moment of her life. It is an unintentional, deeply ingrained trauma response, a fleeting shadow of the victim she once was. This microscopic detail acts as a psychological skeleton key, violently unlocking a forbidden door deep within the labyrinth of Matt's damaged brain. The fragile dam holding back the horrors of his past cracks, and a singular, horrifying memory forces its way to the surface. It is not a memory of a business deal or a petty argument. It is the visceral, sensory-rich recollection of the sexual assault he perpetrated against the woman standing before him. The flood of this repressed memory is not a gentle realization, but a brutal, psychological assault on Matt's current, fragile state of mind. The collision between the blank, relatively innocent man he has believed himself to be over the past few weeks and the undeniable, monstrous reality of what he did to Sharon is catastrophic. He experiences the memory not just as a visual flashback, but as an overwhelming sensory overload. He feels the violence, the predatory dominance, the sheer, unadulterated evil of his own actions. The psychological dissonance is too immense for his recovering brain to process. The guilt, which had been theoretical up until this point, suddenly becomes a crushing, tangible weight that threatens to obliterate his sanity. He is violently torn between the monster of his past and the terrified, remorseful man of his present. This internal psychological explosion instantly manifests into a horrifying physical breakdown. Matt's face drains of all color, replacing his previous confusion with a mask of absolute, paralyzing terror. His body begins to convulse, a violent, involuntary reaction to the horror unfolding within his own mind. He starts to hyperventilate, his chest heaving as he struggles to draw breath in a room that suddenly feels entirely devoid of oxygen. He thrashes against the hospital bed, his movements erratic and dangerous, driven by a primal need to escape the confines of his own horrifying reality. He begins to scream, a guttural, agonizing sound of a man being torn apart from the inside out. He is no longer in the hospital room. He is trapped in the nightmare of his own making, reliving the atrocity he committed with a newfound, devastating clarity. For Sharon, the sudden and violent transformation of the man in the bed is the ultimate realization of her deepest fears. The vulnerable, amnesiac patient vanishes, replaced by the thrashing, screaming embodiment of her trauma. The sheer, unpredictable violence of his panic attack traps her in a state of paralyzing terror. The walls of the hospital room seem to close in on her, creating a suffocating sense of claustrophobia. Her instinct to flee, to run as far away from this monster as possible, battles against a terrifying physical paralysis. She is witnessing the exact moment her abuser remembers his crime, and the raw, unfiltered horror of his reaction is a terrifying spectacle that leaves her utterly defenseless. She tries to back away, her hands trembling, her breath catching in her throat, as she realizes that the fragile piece of his amnesia has been violently, irrevocably shattered. Just as the situation in the hospital room reaches a crescendo of absolute panic and danger, the door bursts open with explosive force. Nick and Victor Newman, having been alerted to Sharon's whereabouts and driven by an overwhelming instinct to protect her, storm into the room. The sight that greets them is one of pure, unadulterated chaos. Nick's visceral reaction to seeing the mother of his children trapped in a room with a thrashing, screaming Matt Clark is instantaneous and explosive. His protective rage, already amplified by his ongoing, agonizing battle with addiction and withdrawal, surges to the forefront. Victor, the imposing, calculating patriarch, assesses the situation with cold, furious precision. The sheer physical presence of the two Newman men alters the gravity of the room, their combined fury creating an impenetrable shield between Sharon and the chaotic danger of Matt's breakdown. The culmination of Matt's terrifying panic attack arrives with a sudden, eerie finality. The human body and mind can only endure so much psychological and physical trauma before initiating a forced shutdown to preserve itself. Overwhelmed by the crushing weight of his newly unearthed memories, the sheer terror of his own actions, and the physical exertion of his thrashing, Matt's system simply overloads. His screams taper off into ragged, desperate gasps for air. His eyes, why would the horror of his own reflection suddenly roll back? The violent convulsions cease, replaced by a sudden, terrifying stillness as his body goes entirely limp. He collapses back onto the hospital pillows, losing consciousness completely, plunging back into the dark abyss of his own mind. The sudden silence in the room is deafening, broken only by the frantic, rhythmic beating of the heart monitor. As a deeply invested observer of this harrowing narrative, it is impossible not to feel a profound sense of heartache and subjective emotional turmoil while witnessing this scene unfold. Watching a survivor like Sharon Newman bravely step into the same room as her abuser, seeking a closure that is constantly denied to her, is a testament to her incredible resilience. Yet it is agonizing to see her subjected to further trauma. The complexity of Matt Clark's amnesia storyline forces us into a deeply uncomfortable moral gray area, challenging our understanding of redemption, guilt, and the inherent nature of evil. When the memory of his horrific crime finally breaks through the barrier of his amnesia, the resulting panic attack is a visceral representation of a soul recognizing its own damnation. It evokes a complicated mixture of vindication and pity, a stark reminder that true accountability is often a violent, destructive process. My heart breaks for Sharon, whose pursuit of truth inadvertently unleashed the very monster she was trying to understand, highlighting the tragic reality that some wounds are simply too deep to ever truly examine without causing further bleeding. With Matt Clark now lying unconscious, the fragile equilibrium of Genoa City has been shattered into a million irreparable pieces. When he inevitably wakes up, will the horrific memory of his assault on Sharon remain at the forefront of his mind, serving as the catalyst for the return of his full, terrifying persona? Or will his mind retreat once again into the safety of amnesia, leaving the Newman family trapped in this agonizing cycle of uncertainty? Furthermore, how will Nick Newman, currently battling his own intense internal demons, react to the knowledge that his ultimate nemesis is slowly regaining the memories of the atrocities he committed against his family? The stage is set for an unprecedented explosion of vengeance, trauma, and desperate survival, ensuring that the next chapter in this saga will be the most dangerous one yet.